Welcome in this new movie of science. It's about paragraph 2.4, and paragraph 2.4 is about density. And for density, we need to take a look at the mass and the volume. So on the top right corner, I wrote down as a note something you should either know by heart or make a note so you can start to learning it by heart. That the mass, that is how much of a substance there is the V, and it is measured in grams or G, and the volume is a capital V and is measured in cubic centimeters or centimeter to the power of 3. And these are quantities, these things you can measure. They have symbols, the M and the V, and this is a unit where you measure it in, and it has a symbol as well, or it's short. And we're going to take a look at a piece of wood. I'm going to multiply it. I'm going to copy it each time and see what is going on. Well, the volume is 1 cubic centimeter of the piece of wood. That means that it takes space of 1 cubic centimeter. And if I'm going to write it down, I have one cube right now. Volume is 1, mass is 0.58. You just measure that with the scales. What I'm going to do, I'm going to copy the piece of wood, put it next to it over here. So I have an object made out of two identical pieces of wood, cubes of wood. The one has a volume of 1, so two have a volume of 2. And that's over here. And then the mass, well, it needs to be doubled as well, so with 1.16. And I'm going to do the same thing with a, and then I have a new object, and it's formed out of 3 cubes, and each cube has a volume of 1, so it is a total volume of 3. And then the mass is 3 times the original mass because we have 3 identical objects. So that is 1.74. And we can continue with 4, and then we have, let's take a look, 2, and that is 3, and that is 2 or 3, and so on and so on. And you can see that it's a ratio table, that you need to do the same thing, that if you divide the upper number by the lower number, you always get the same number if we have the same material. What if we do it with, for instance, gold? So this is wood and we have gold. For gold, we start with a cube of 1 cubic centimeter. Then the mass of that cube of 1 cubic centimeter is 19.3. And then if we add a second cube, then the volume is also 2, but then the mass becomes 30. 8.6. And if we have it with 3, then the volume is 3 times 1 cube, and the mass is also 3 times 1 cube because I just copy the objects. And then the it is 0.9, and that is 7, and that is 5, so 57. I can do the same thing with another cube, and then we need to add 1 cubic centimeter as well, and then we need to add 19.3 grams as well. So that's 2, and then it's 77. And then if we divide both numbers, the number on the top with the number on the bottom, we all each and every time get the same number, but it's different than the one of wood. So we can recognize that number as belonging to gold or wood. So that's a property because you can recognize a substance from a property. And that number, if we divide the mass with the volume, it's called the density. How dense something is. The denser it is, the more closer packed together, the bigger the density. And the density is always a mass over the volume. That it is by definition. Okay, so let's make a note out of this. This density is the mass per unit of volume. It is a property. You can see densities in your book in a table in paragraph 4. And density, if we calculate it, back over here. If we calculated it, then the density is always the mass over the volume. But that's written out very, very long, and I want to be lazy in a good way, so that don't write down things. That's what scientists basically are. So they're not going to write down density all the time. They're going to use a letter or symbol, and the letter or the symbol is this letter. It looks like a P, but it is not. It's called a rho. It's a Greek letter, and we already have the small m and a capital V for mass and volume. This is the formula for density. And what I also need to write down over here that we have, I'm going to add it over here, density. Oh, is the rho, and the rho is in cubic centimeters per, sorry, grams per cubic centimeters, because we fill in grams and divide it with cubic centimeters, and that is called grams per cubic centimeters. This is a unit, this is a symbol, or this rho over here, and it's a density. Okay, how are we going to use that? Well, suppose you have in your kitchen something that is not that clear what it is, and you need to figure out what it is. It could be salt, it could be sugar, you do not know. So what do? You're going to measure the mass and the volume. And how do you? So what you get? You get a mass of 6.6 grams, and you have volume of 3 cubic centimeters. And if you want to know what substance is this, then you need to calculate the density. And if you're going to do that, we're going to be on fire. And I'm going to write that down, on fire, over here. On fire. Then we underline, it's Dutch onderstreep, or highlight, noteer, what is what, formule or formula. I invullen or rekenen eenheid. Okay, so what is what? We already have the first two steps, onderstreep, because normally with tests, and the further you get into science, the longer it became more and more often, you will get a big, huge story. And you need to figure out what you need to use. So basically that is Dutch reading or English reading. And we already know what it is, onderstreep and noteer. This is basically noteer. What is given, what is asked. Then formula or formula. Well, the formula is, if we need to calculate density, always mass over volume. And you get marks for writing down the formula, so please do. And you need to fill it in. the mass is 6.6, the volume is 3. Then rekenen, so you simply grab your calculator if you can't do this by your head, and you get 2.2. And then eenheid or units, the density is always in grams per cubic centimeters, so we just put down grams per cubic centimeters afterwards. And then you need to figure out what it is. Then you go to the table in your book, don't learn it by heart, just look it up, and then I see it is salt. Or kitchen salt. As I should have. Okay, I want you to practice this, and so I'm going to give you a number and a few numbers for you to do. So we have a small piece, and that piece that apparently has a volume of what do I have of 2.5 cubic centimeters, and we measure the mass, and the mass is 26.5 grams, and I want you to figure out what is it, what kind of substance is that. Hey, see you in class. Until then, bye.